Have you ever heard of a ghost railway? I'm talking about a massive transportation network, one that was even bigger than a country's main national railway, that connected almost every single town and village. Now, what if I told you it just vanished? Today, we're digging into the incredible story of Belgium's lost railway, a colossal tram system that was built, absolutely loved, and then almost completely erased from existence.
It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it? But here's the thing. This isn't some hypothetical question. It's exactly what happened in Belgium. This is the story of how a nation built a transport revolution, and then, piece by piece, took it all apart. So let's dive in, right at the beginning.
So, to understand how something so huge could just disappear, we first have to get our heads around how it was built in the first place. Our story starts way back in the late 19th century, with a super ambitious project and the organization that made it all happen.
Okay, so the year is 1884. The Belgian government creates this new entity, the SNCV, or the NMVB in Dutch, and its mission was simple, but honestly, it was massive. Build a local railway. They called it the Vicinal network. The whole idea was to reach all the towns, all the villages, all the rural spots that the main railway, the one focused on big cities, had completely ignored. It was a plan to literally tie the entire country together with tracks.
And you know what? They didn't just pull it off, they blew all expectations out of the water. At its absolute peak in the middle of the 20th century, this Vicinal network stretched for nearly 5,000 kilometers. For a so-called secondary network, that scale is it's almost unbelievable.
Just let that sink in for a second. For a while there, this secondary tram network was actually longer than Belgium's main national railway. This was no little side project. It was like a parallel universe of transportation, this dense, intricate web of tracks that reached right into the heart of the country. And pretty quickly, this network blossomed into its golden age. For the better part of a century, this wasn't just infrastructure. No, it was a fundamental part of everyday Belgian life. The growth was just explosive. The very first line, powered by steam, opened up on the coast in 1885. Then, after World War I, they started electrifying the system, which made the trams way faster and more efficient. And by 1945, right after the end of the Second World War, the whole thing hit its absolute peak, a sprawling mix of old-school steam and modern electric line.
But this thing was more than just numbers and tracks. It really had a soul. People affectionately called it the Buren tram, the farmer's tram. And why? Because it was the absolute lifeline for rural communities. It would literally carry farmers and all their fresh produce from the countryside right into the city markets in places like Brussels every morning.
And this was so much more than just a passenger service. I mean, these trams were the true workhorses of the local economy. They carried everything. You had people going to work, sure, but also the Daily Mail, coal for people's homes, stone from the quarries, and even tons and tons of sugar beets during the harvest.
But, every golden age has to come to an end. The years after World War II marked a huge turning point, because a new, very powerful competitor was starting to take over the roads.
You really have to picture the scene. The tram network was worn down, right? It had seen years of heavy use and not much maintenance during the war. And at that exact same time, the private car starts becoming affordable. It was this symbol of freedom, of convenience. All of a sudden, the old tram started to look slow and kind of old-fashioned.
What happened next wasn't some slow, gentle decline. No, it was a rapid, almost brutal dismantling of this once vital network. It was the Great Replacement, swapping out rails for asphalt.
I mean, just look at these numbers. The collapse is absolutely staggering. You go from over 4,700 kilometers in 1945 down to less than 1,000 by 1960. And by 1980, it was practically gone. In just over 30 years, an entire national infrastructure was pretty much erased.
And here's the kicker. This wasn't an accident. This was a conscious political and economic choice. Belgium, just like a lot of other countries at the time, decided to bet its future on roads and cars. Tram lines were literally ripped up from the streets to make more room for traffic, and the services were replaced by buses. And in a funny twist of irony, they often kept the exact same route numbers as the trams they just got rid of.
So, is it all gone then? Well, not quite. If you know where to look, the ghost of the Vicinal network is actually still all around us. It's this living legacy, hiding in plain sight.
A few precious little pieces have survived. The most famous one for sure is the Belgian coast tram, the Tram, which is amazing because it still runs along part of the very first Vicinal line from 1885.
Besides that, you've got bits of the Charleroi metro system and a few really charming tourist and museum lines that are the last working reminders of this once mighty system.
And here's where it gets really fun. You can become a sort of transport archaeologist yourself. Next time you're in Belgium, keep your eyes peeled. Look for old station buildings that are now houses or cafes. Notice those extra wide roads or green paths that just don't seem to make sense. That was probably a tram line. And street names like Stationsstraat, Station Street, in a tiny village with no train station, that's a dead giveaway. These are the secret clues to a lost world. The final nail in the coffin really came in 1991. The original national company was officially dissolved. Its remaining operations, mostly buses and just a few tram lines, were split into the regional companies we have today, De Lion in Flanders and Tech in Wallonia. And just like that, the Vicinal era was officially over.
And that kind of brings us to our final thought. The story of the Vicinal Tram, it's more than just a history lesson. It brings up some really important questions for us today. In an age where we're all desperately trying to rethink mobility and sustainability, what can we learn from a network that once connected communities so well, only to be thrown away for the convenience of the car? It's a powerful reminder to really think about what we lose when we chase progress. Thanks for joining us.